a small town, among narrow streets, there was an old workshop filled with wooden toys. In this workshop lived an old and lonely carpenter named Geppetto. Geppetto spent his time lovingly crafting toys with his hands. One day, he came across a beautiful pine log. A voice inside him whispered, "You must make something special with this wood." Geppetto carefully used his fine carpentry tools and began carving a figure of a child. He worked for hours, shaping and polishing. Finally, he created a little wooden boy. Looking at him with love, he said, "I will call you Pinocchio." Geppetto placed a hat on Pinocchio, sewed a small outfit for him, and after finishing, he sighed, "Oh, how I wish I had a real son." That night, Geppetto lay in bed, happy to have completed Pinocchio. Outside, the stars were shining, and a magical light appeared in the sky. The light slowly drifted into the workshop, revealing a graceful figure glowing in blue. The Blue Fairy. The Blue Fairy had heard Geppetto's wish. She raised her wand and touched Pinocchio's wooden body, releasing a soft glow. Suddenly, Pinocchio's eyes opened, but Pinocchio was not yet a real boy. The fairy said to him, "Pinocchio, if you have a good heart, and if you are brave and honest, you can become a real boy." The fairy also gave him a guide to distinguish right from wrong, a cricket named Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy sat on Pinocchio's shoulder and said, "I will always be by your side as your conscience." When morning came, Geppetto opened his eyes. At that moment, Pinocchio moved. "Father!" said Pinocchio. Geppetto's eyes widened and his heart filled with joy. "You can talk?" he asked in astonishment. Pinocchio started running around the workshop. Geppetto burst into tears of happiness. He was no longer alone. Geppetto hugged Pinocchio and said, "You are my son, Pinocchio. I will love you and protect you always." Geppetto wanted Pinocchio to be a good boy. He prepared a school bag for him, dressed him in nice clothes, and sent him to school. However, on his way to school, Pinocchio encountered two cunning tricksters, the fox and the cat. The fox said, "Going to school? What for? Come with us, we'll show you a much more fun place." Despite Jiminy Cricket's warnings, Pinocchio ignored him and followed them. The fox and the cat took Pinocchio to the theater of a greedy puppet master named Stromboli. When Stromboli realized that Pinocchio could move without strings, he was amazed. "This boy will make me a fortune," he said, and he locked Pinocchio in a cage. Pinocchio cried and begged the Blue Fairy for help. At that moment, the Blue Fairy appeared and said, "Tell me what happened." As Pinocchio started lying, his nose began to grow. It grew so long that it started knocking over everything in the room. The fairy said, "Pinocchio, lying will only get you into more trouble." Pinocchio realized his mistake, told the truth, and his nose returned to normal. The Blue Fairy freed him from the cage and advised him on the importance of honesty. After gaining his freedom, Pinocchio made another wrong choice. On the road, he met a boy named Lampwick. Lampwick told him about a place called Pleasure Island, a magical place where there was no need to study, and children could play all day. Pinocchio went to the island with Lampwick. At first, he had a lot of fun, but then something terrifying happened. The children slowly began turning into donkeys. Pinocchio's ears started to grow longer as well. Pinocchio quickly fled the island and wanted to return home. However, he learned that Geppetto had gone out to sea to search for him and had been swallowed by a giant whale. Summoning his courage, Pinocchio jumped into the ocean and found the whale. When he reached its stomach, he found Geppetto inside. Father and son embraced each other. "Father, we will get out of here," said Pinocchio. Then he had a brilliant idea. They lit a fire to make the whale sneeze. The whale's nose itched, and with a giant sneeze, Geppetto and Pinocchio were thrown outside. Pinocchio and Geppetto returned home. Pinocchio had now learned that lying and making bad friends was wrong. Hugging Geppetto, he said, "Father, I will never leave you alone, and I will always be a good boy." At that moment, the Blue Fairy appeared again and smiled. "Pinocchio, you are now a brave and good boy. You have earned the right to be a real child." Magical lights swirled around Pinocchio, and suddenly, his wooden body transformed into that of a real boy. Geppetto, overjoyed, exclaimed, "My son!" and embraced Pinocchio. Pinocchio was no longer just a puppet. He was a real boy. Dear friends, if you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in new adventures.